So today I'm going to talk about 3 specific issues that are prohibition problems, not marijuana problems, and how technology might help to solve those issues. In the production realm, we have environmental concerns and energy consumption issues. In the processing world, we have potentially dangerous methodologies that are creating some scares, but are also possibly creating some health concerns. And in the consumption realm, the truth is that smoked cannabis is not necessarily the best answer for a lot of patients in particular, and there are many other ways that we can start to meet those needs. And there are some interesting trends happening in terms of the development of other types of products that are coming down the line. So let's start with production. Many of you have probably heard of the crisis in our national parks related to cannabis production. Cartels have set up shop cultivating, or perhaps not even cartels, major producers that are not cartel affiliated perhaps, have set up shop in our national parks and are causing tremendous environmental damage. They're rerouting water supplies. They are trashing local areas. They are, building out these very large cultivations areas with 1,000 or more plants in some cases that are destroying the local environment and in fact causing concerns about extinction for one particular species of rodent in California. We're hearing about all sorts of issues related to the drought. But again, these are prohibition problems. Because of course, in a regulated market, we don't see cannabis being cultivated in national parks. It's cultivated in licensed facilities, whether that's indoor or outdoor. So by taking cannabis out of the illicit market and moving it into the licit market, we're able to end that issue in its entirety and start to apply some of the interesting technologies that have been developing in both indoor and outdoor cultivation for many other industries. A lot of the vegetables that we eat today are cultivated indoors in highly efficient facilities, hydroponic facilities that are producing very high quality produce at a fairly energy efficient, in fairly energy efficient ways, or in greenhouses supplemented by technological advances. The Lawrence Livermore Institute has, sorry, give me just one second. Let me make sure I've got this properly. Lawrence Livermore Labs estimates that 1% of energy consumption nationwide is consumed by illicit cannabis cultivation. 1%. And that's because it's happening in basements, right? It's not happening in greenhouses. It's not happening in hyper-efficient facilities where folks are very interested in maximizing environment or their energy use in order to minimize their bills. In California, it's estimated that energy consumption is about 3% of statewide consumption. California, of course, being the largest market to produce illicit cannabis in the nation. Now, if we are applying new tech to a more environmentally focused cannabis production regimen, we can see reductions of between 30 and 50% of energy consumption in indoor facilities with new emerging LED lighting. If we are cultivating outdoors or in greenhouses, which is probably the most ideal from an environmental perspective, outdoors on farms, not in parks, of course, then we see an even greater reduction in the energy consumption related to cannabis. But none of these things can happen until it's legal and until it's no longer forced underground or into illicit cultivation facilities. On the processing side, we see a handful of different things. People who are trying to figure out how to minimize the amount of cannabis that they are in possession of, which is something that very frequently happens in a prohibition market in order to avoid heavy penalties. We think about crack cocaine, for example, is one of the ways that happens in an illicit market. Well, production of hash oil is very similar. You take this much cannabis and turn it into this much hash oil, and you aren't going to be punished as heavily if the punishments are based on weight. The home production of hash has created a handful of problems that can be easily solved through these emerging technologies. One of them is that people are extracting the components of cannabis using potentially dangerous solvents. Now, for those people who are well aware of the cannabis world, I might catch some flack online for referring to butane or other solvents as potentially dangerous. Of course, hexane and butane and other solvents like that are used all the time in food production and vitamin production and whatnot. But there's a very significant difference between a lab-controlled production of hash oil or anything else and somebody at home with PVC and a can of butane. Those are two totally different things. And if you've been paying any attention at all to the news around cannabis and the bad news around cannabis, it's that people blow themselves up. This is a fact, right? Not often, and it's not a marijuana problem. Again, it's a prohibition problem. But this is happening. People are using potentially dangerous solvents in order to create these products that are extremely popular, and it is dangerous to do in the home. Not so much in a lab. In a lab, it's fine. However, in the lab, what we're finding now in the regulated market is that there are probably more ideal ways to do these extractions. There are other ways to go about pulling the ideal components out of cannabis, whether that be THC or any of the dozens of other cannabinoids, whether that be the various terpenes that impact the way that cannabis crosses your blood-brain barrier, whatever it might be, and pulling those desirable components out of the cannabis and creating these new and innovative products in a safer way, both in terms of the production itself and the human beings, the impact on the human beings that are taking it in. So some really interesting stuff happening there with CO2 extraction and other types of methodologies like that. And then the third piece that I'd like to talk about is, and sorry, there's actually one more really interesting piece here in terms of the processing. It's not just that we are finding better ways to pull those products out of the those components out of the cannabis. We're also finding better ways to put them together again in unique formulations that will eventually, I believe, be designed specifically for individuals and their symptoms. I will be able to walk into someday, any of us will be able to walk into someday, a pharmacy of sorts where we can say, here's what I'm experiencing, here's the problems that I'm having, how do we fix this? And someone will say, okay, we give you this, 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 and this. And then we refine over time, very specifically, the cannabis formulation that's going to work for individuals. Now, it might not be that specific, but I genuinely believe that at some point we might actually get there. And that's going to be a tremendously powerful moment for cannabis as medicine or as a health and wellness product. We are also finding that products to eliminate psychotropic effects are starting to come on the market. So we're seeing pills and drinks and patches and all sorts of things where if you find yourself, pardon the phrase, too high, then you can stop that immediately. You know, Maureen Dowd really could have used that when she was in Colorado eating that chocolate bar, right? But the fact of the matter is that you can consume THC to a point where it makes you uncomfortable, deeply uncomfortable, and odds are really good that nothing bad is going to happen to you except being really uncomfortable for a while. But there are these products coming out on the market now where you can drink it or take a pill and it will actually change the way that your liver is processing the THC and immediately, within 20 minutes, stop the psychotropic effect. So you're getting rid of that anxiety, you're getting rid of that negative experience, you're able to normalize again and find a comfortable space. The very last thing that I'll talk about is consumption tools. In terms of the ways that people are consuming cannabis, you know, in 50 years, most cannabis consumers might roll joints on Halloween when they're dressed up like hippies from the 60s. They are not going to be smoking cannabis in 50, no one essentially is going to be smoking cannabis in 50 years. It is an imperfect ingestion method by many degrees. Now, there are social and traditional reasons and ritual reasons to consume cannabis that way, and there are many people today who prefer it, but in the future, that's not going to be the case. We already see incredible movement in terms of development of new vaporizers in particular. And there are even companies, there's a company in Colorado right now working with a small business incubator out there that will bring a wide variety of vaporizers to your home for a Tupperware party. And you can check out all of these vaporizers and decide which one is the best for you and then order it through this company. Who'd have thunk, right? But that's where we are today in terms of those consumption technologies. And it's not just inhaling, it's patches, it's pills, it's tinctures that you drop under your tongue, and all sorts of different ways that we are finding to really refine the cannabis consumption experience, both for the adult user, the adult social user, and for the medical user as well.